is the last of the stories Jesus tells in Matthew, that Matthew records. And this one is, most people know it by the sheep and the goats. You heard of it before? Everybody heard of it before? Sheep and goats? Anybody? No. It's when it's the final judgment and Jesus is dividing the sheep from the goats, and the sheep are the ones that have, and Jesus said, you fed me when I was hungry, you gave me water when I was thirsty, you clothed me when I was naked. And they said, we did? We didn't? No, we did. And Jesus said, you're blessed, go that way. And then the poor goats, he says, you didn't feed me when I was hungry. You didn't give me anything to drink. You're going this way. And so it's like the judgment. And most of us don't pay attention to it because we don't want to think about that. And, we don't want to think about the judgment, which side will and which side will, And, but anyway, so it is a fairly well-known scripture just because of the context and everything. And so that's the scripture for today. And so we're talking about people, how we get to the point where we just automatically, and I think this is what Matthew is talking about through the whole book, and that is that what it means to live a life, a Christian life, what it means to live a life given to God. And I think Matthew is trying to teach us by you telling us what Jesus said, what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to live. And this final thing is really important because it's the last words Jesus will say before he is in Jerusalem for the last week of his life. So it's kind of a summation of what he's been trying to teach everybody. Here, let's sum it up. And so one of the things I'm going to say in the sermon is that when I was growing up, people would talk about, preachers would talk about the judgment and all that. And they talked about things like if you've, if you drank, if you cussed, if you had sexual improprieties, if you had all these things, those kind of things. Nobody ever said it's about feeding the poor, feeding the hungry, ministering to the poor, taking care of it. That wasn't high on the list. Now, some of you may have grown up in other denominations or churches where they did talk about that a lot, but I even read some people, one is a Lutheran pastor, and she said, I didn't hear about that. It was about these things you should not do, and if you do these things, you're in big trouble. So this is interesting that when Jesus sums up all that he wants to teach, or has been teaching, this is what he talks about, is you didn't give me a cup of cold water, you didn't give me any clothes to wear, you didn't help when I needed help. So this is a very interesting kind of, not turn of events, because I think Jesus has been teaching this way all along, but for us it is, it's an important word. And so what Jesus, I think, if we summed it up in one thing, it's what we say every Sunday morning when we say, a celebration you will find extravagant hospitality. And I think that extravagant hospitality is what Jesus is talking about. And so my question for today is, what does that mean when you hear us say, every week I say that. Celebration is a church where you'll find tradition without judgment and extravagant hospitality. What comes to your mind? Does anything come to your mind? Or you just, it's like, that's what we say, and we just go on. Does anybody, when you hear that term, what comes to your mind? Even not about celebration. What comes to your mind about extravagant hospitality? I mean, we know
whatever you need.
Whatever you need, okay? So at celebration, you can find whatever you need, okay?
Welcoming, Regina. And another, what's your cup today?
Oh, my cup today, thank you for saying that. Okay, so love is love. And it's got hearts down in the bottom, there's a heart, and it's got hearts. And I think it's from the Human Rights Campaign. So that is a good word, love is love. So, yeah, so extravagant hospitality, extravagant means kind of over the top, doesn't it? Like, just, and so, I mean, that, I think, is the question for us. It's a personal question. Jesus is talking to people personally, but it's also a church question. It's also, what are you going to be as a church? How are you going to show this kind of hospitality, this care for, yeah.
Well, it might not necessarily be inside the church walls. It's out,
True.
Out in the community.
It's true that we are a church that people know they can come to if they, need a safe place. Obviously, Celebration's been that forever, since it was started, a safe place for people to be. And then the question is, well, what else is that going to mean for us? And we are doing things that show extravagant hospitality. The peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it sounds like that's a little thing, right? But if you're starving, that would be the best sandwich you ever ate. You'll be thrilled to get it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's not a little thing. And during the pandemic, it was for sure not a little thing because people were really having trouble finding food and that kind of thing. And and then we, providing weekend food for children. That's a big thing because children are very astute observers of life, and they know. When they grow up, they know there was no food in my house on the weekends, but some church brought food. And someday, somewhere, in some class like this, somebody's going to say, I don't know what church it was, but they brought food. And it doesn't matter that they know what church does it. All that matters is they know that a church provided for them. And so we have to believe that we may not see the rewards, and I don't mean rewards personally, but we may not see the goodness of it, but somewhere down the line, there will be ripples of the goodness of it. Because, if you wake up on Monday morning and your belly's growling because you haven't had anything to eat since Friday at lunch when you were at school, and then you remember, oh, that backpack has some food I can eat. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. So it's not nothing. All right, other things that you can think of that, and it doesn't have to be what we're doing, it could be something we could do that would be extravagant hospitality.
I think one thing, when you say it is, there's a lot of beautiful people here who are just extra nice.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We're extravagant.
We're extravagant, okay. I think that's true.
Extra, we're extra.
Extra, yeah. We've talked about that, and I've said this many times, that Celebration is, I've been in a lot of churches in my life, and Celebration is undoubtedly one of the friendliest, warmest churches I've ever been in. And I've told you before, when my friends visit, they go, people came up and said hello, and they were just, because that doesn't happen everywhere. We think it does, and it should, but it doesn't. And, I've been to churches where I walked in, sat down, had worship service, walked out. Nobody ever said a word. Maybe they thought I was a member, I don't know. But it happens, and so it's not a little thing. Okay, so people who show that kind of extravagant welcome to other people is really, that's truly one of the ways that we are show extravagant hospitality. Okay, something else that you can think of that shows extravagant hospitality. Anybody? I got up and I was like, what am I gonna wear? I looked at, had my phone to see what the temperature was. It's cold. Okay, it started working? Oh, good, very good. We're talking about extravagant hospitality, what that means, what it looks like, what it could look like, what else we could do that would, what are some things we could do that were even more extravagant. And last week we touched on this just a little bit, but you know, when we start talking about food and did you feed me and all that, it kind of touches on, Jay, what we were talking about last week a little bit, people in other countries and, you know, and people's perspective of how things are, and the thing we can't escape is how we are a country of excess. And when I say these things, I say it to myself too. I'm not just telling you. We're a country of excess. And we don't know how other people in the world, some of us have seen it, but some of us haven't. And we don't know how other people in the world, how desperate their lives are. I think I told you all this. If I did, I'm sorry. But my dad, when he was in Second World War, was in China, and then he was in India for a time. And he said they were standing down at the river, and there was a soldier there with him who spoke the language. And this woman came up with a baby and said something. My dad said, "What did she say?" And he said, she said she'd sell you that baby for $1. Because she probably didn't have anything to eat. And she thought, if you buy my baby, at least my baby probably will eat. So that was a long time ago, but relatively speaking, if you account for, you know, it's still dire for many, many people. And so we can't just run past that. We'd like to, but we have to remember that, and I think the world sees us like that, you know, as people that care a lot about their stuff. And a lot of people, that's the motivation to come here, because you can have a bathroom, and you can have hot running water, and you can have the things that make life more comfortable. All right, so we're talking about what extravagant hospitality means. It's a real important concept. We say it every Sunday. So we've been talking about how it looks at celebration and what it could look like, what other things would make us look or make us be extravagantly hospitable.
All the meals and fun things we do.
The meals
Yeah.
for,
Fellowship.
Yeah, everything.
yeah, oh, you mean all the here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
okay.
have a lot of fun.
All right, that's being hospitable. People feel welcomed and a part.
As many times as I've been visiting, I've always come through the back door and in here, and Scott goes to choir, and so I've never ever, I don't think I've ever come in the front doors. But do you have greeters out there? I think that's really important, if you have greeters that welcome, you know, members and new people with a smiling face, and thank you for coming to worship, or, so you do have that?
We do have
Okay,
that.
I was sure you did.
Yeah,
I just
we do.
Because I think that's really important
It is
in
important.
any church.
It is important. Yeah. And we all have talked about Gay. I've talked about her in my, she was a member who was extravagantly hospitable. And she is a good model for all of us because of the way she just spoke to every single person that walked in the door with a smile on her face, and made them feel like we were really glad they were there, and we were glad they were here. So, so we miss her. But it doesn't mean that we can't follow in her footsteps and do the same thing. Diane, tell us what you're doing about taking the food and stuff.
Oh, we've been taking, bag lunches downtown and feeding the homeless and the hungry. We put a sandwich together, either bologna and cheese or peanut butter and jelly, and we give them a little bag of chips and, some fruit and a snack. And they all get that, and it's in a sack lunch. And I'll walk up, I roll up to somebody and ask them if they're hungry. If they're hungry, I give them a bag. And they get a bottle of water also. So we're helping to feed the hungry.
And you go mostly to the bus station?
To the bus station down by the train
Mm-hmm.
station.
And so you get a lot of takers, don't you?
I do. We take 20 bags.
Who's we?
My friend Kimberly, she's my next door neighbor. And we take 10 in each bag, and ours cooler bag, and water, and we have 10 in each. And we ride around the train station and the bus station and look for hungry people, because a lot of people, there's a free bathroom there, and they go to the bathroom, and they can towel off and wash off some. And I go down there and you see people there, especially with the buggies full of stuff. And that's what they're hungry, and they're like, I am. And I actually have some people come up to me and say, I heard you're the person who's handing out sandwiches today. And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. So I give them a sandwich and some water, so that they like that.
Yeah, I bet they do. Have you ever thought about why people on the street smell? Why do they smell bad?
I can't shower.
Can't shower, what else?
I wear the same clothes every day, every day.
And when you can't, when every place you go says no public restrooms, then what do? You know, so they wet themselves, so then they smell, and then nobody wants them around because they smell. And do some of you remember about, it's probably now been about 20 years ago, and because it was when I first came to Fort Worth, and there was and I can't think of his name, but there was a reporter for the Star-Telegram who decided he wanted to see what the life of a homeless, an unhoused person was like. So he did, put all his stuff, closed it up, and went out with just what he had, the clothes he had. And so one of the first things he said was, this was before True Worth or the Day Resource Center. We didn't have that. And he said, where do you go to the bathroom? And right, can't take a shower. And he then wrote about it. And so that's how the first Day Resource Center happened, because he wrote about all these things that, if you're unhoused and you're on the street, you don't have. And so what do? So the city talked about how can we meet this need, and so the first Day Resource Center was started. It was very small. True Worth, where Judy Glover works, which is now part of Presbyterian Night Shelter, True Worth is huge. And we should go do it. Judy would be delighted to give us a tour. But they have everything there.
One thing about these shelters, a lot of people that are on the streets don't like to go.
That's right.
Because
That's
they're
exactly
afraid they're gonna get all their stuff stolen.
That's right.
Or something's gonna have bad happen.
Right.
And they just don't like to go to those places.
But see, True Worth is like a day thing. You don't stay there. They have lockers you can put your stuff in. They have computers you can use if you're looking for services or whatever. They have mailboxes where you can get your mail. They have classes that you can participate in if you want to. They have a book study class. Now, you might think unhoused people don't care about that, but some of them read and they want, you know. So they have a class. They have food, hot food. So every day you can go through and get hot food. They do have social services, so you can get your ID or your whatever you need and get help with that. If we get frustrated when we get on the phone and you know, it's like, hold, well, press 8 if you want this, and press 2 if you want this, and 5 if you want this. I mean, I get frustrated with that. Can you imagine somebody that's not used to doing that? And that, I mean, it's very frustrating. And so True Worth will help with all of those things. And just about any need, they have washers and dryers. You can wash your clothes. So any need just about that you have, if you're unhoused, they can help you with it. And then when they started, they weren't part of the Presbyterian Night Shelter, but then that became a part of the Presbyterian Night Shelter. And I think one of the most exciting things that's happening, and some of you may not, we may have talked about this, but so Southwestern Seminary had a lot of student housing. And some of the student housing was old. It was from the military, built it during the war, I guess. And it was like duplexes kind of thing. They were, what am I trying to say? They were frame, you know, wood frame, but really nice little apartments. And they're little. And so the seminary then built new student housing across the street, across Seminary Drive. Well, now their enrollment has gone down so much, they didn't need all those other places. So Presbyterian Night Shelter and the city of Fort Worth have bought them, and they are going to be for unhoused families to have a home. And I just think that is brilliant. I'm thrilled. And they'll be near better schools. They'll be gooder, better, whatever. They'll be near more, you know, in a neighborhood more. I just think that's one of the most exciting things that I've heard about in a long time, and I think what a great use of that property. And so instead of it just sitting there, nobody living there. So unhoused persons will be able to live there. And one of the things that I've mentioned and that I would love to see us participate in is Habitat for Humanity, which is where we would help build a house for hopefully a LGBTQ couple, family, and I think that would be very exciting if we could participate.
I've been involved in 2 of those back in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and such a joy. The families come and see, and actually with the little kids, you know, the hand of a hammer,
Yeah.
and just that is a wonderful experience.
is.
And I have a question about what you were just speaking of. Is that funded by the Presbyterian Church then?
The Presbyterian Church got it started, but it's its own 501c3. It's separate. I mean, I assume the Presbyterian Church still is a part of it.
Do they possibly get grants?
They get
Yes.
grants.
Yes.
They can get all kinds of things because they're their own. They're separate from First Pres, who got it started. But I'm assuming that maybe there's some agreement that, like, somebody from First Pres is on their board and all of that kind of thing. I'm not sure what the relationship is.
That involves a lot of money.
It involves a
Yes.
lot of
Oh,
money.
my goodness,
A
yeah.
lot. And see, First Pres is they started Trinity Terrace. You know, it's for retired people. It's a upscale kind of living, but that came out of First Presbyterian Church, and now it, of course, is its own thing. I'll tell you just a little side funny story, not funny, but odd. So Broadway, some people at Broadway thought we should, before Trinity Terrace was built, we should buy up some of this land and we should build a retirement facility here. So they bought a bunch of the land around Broadway, and they decided they would call in a consultant to help them with this plan. I mean, people had invested in it, and you know, there was a lot of investment in it. And the consultant said, who would come live downtown? Retired people aren't gonna wanna come live downtown. And so I don't think, so you shouldn't build this. So they didn't. And there were people even after I came along 20 years later who were still upset about that because they had invested money in it and thought it was a great idea. And then the Presbyterians go build Trinity Terrace and everybody's moving downtown. So they would have been on a cutting edge if they had done that. So there you go. Somebody said, well, if we paid for a consultant, we ought to do what they say. So they did. So if I could find some of the oldest people at Broadway, they still would probably be upset that happened. So anyway.
I like the name of that place, True Worth.
I
It's
do
Fort
too.
Worth, but it's also telling
True
people
Worth.
what their true worth is.
That's true. That's true. And I love the work they do. And like I said, we should ask Judy to give a bunch of us a tour. She would be thrilled.
She said she would be more than
Oh,
happy to.
yeah.
We talked about it when we went over for the volunteer
Yeah.
appreciation.
She would love to. And the Presbyterian Ice Shelter, a lot of people were really afraid because it used to be all together. You'd go in and men and women and everything, and if you had kids, you didn't want to take them in there because it
Oh,
was,
no.
Well, now they have a building for women and children, family. They have a building for them, so they are not they have a separate building for veterans. And so it's really evolved into a much bigger thing than it started out to be, but it is quite a ministry. Well, I'm gonna have to go. Last Sunday, I kind of went in when they started ringing the hour, so I get looks. Okay, let's say a prayer before we go. God, we thank you for the crispness of this air, for the way it makes us think of and anticipate Advent and the coming of Jesus. We thank you for the leaves that are turning colors and for the beautiful sky this day. We pray that you would help us to always remember that you have called us to offer extravagant hospitality, not just to the people we like, not just to the people that we think deserve it, but to everyone. We pray that you'd help us to be faithful. Amen. Okay.
They have a lot of volunteer opportunities over there too, at Presbyterian Night Shelter
they
and
do.
True Worth.
Like I volunteered at True Worth in